Welcome to Duluth Junction Workshop. I'm Tyler. This is a truck that's very special to me. It's a 1965 Ford F100, and I've known this truck since I was about 10 years old. My uncle bought this for my grandfather in about 2001, and since then both of them have passed away, and I took care of this truck since I was around college age. This is the first vehicle I ever drove with a stick shift, and it's the first introduction I had to everything old car. I named this truck Boo Radley in high school because I had learned about the book To Kill a Mockingbird, and Boo has not been happy the last few years. I think it's been about 5 years now. I've had this weird driveline vibration where if I'm in reverse and I'm slipping the clutch to back up, the whole rear end of the vehicle just shudders really badly. With a truck this old, you do tend to get things breaking and wearing out, and it's due for stuff. And I have done shocks, I've done rear springs, I've done motor mounts. I had a few years ago, I was in grad school and I didn't have time to do this on my own, so I had someone else do the intake manifold gaskets and the clutch. And I thought, man, that seems like that's about everything. I even checked the U-joints. The U-joints feel fine. And the only two things that I can think of that would still be causing this driveline vibration would have to be either the differential is super bad, which, you know, it probably needs to be gone over. The other option is that the guy who did my clutch job, I'm not sure that he went through all the procedures to do the job correctly, so I'm going to check his work. Specifically, the thing that I don't think he did was resurface the flywheel. And since the truck does vibrate and shudder in the rear end when I slip the clutch, I think that possibly that flywheel vibration is hitting the clutch and grabbing. So if he put a new clutch in and didn't surface the flywheel, you know, if the flywheel is warped, it would still be warped now. I figured the clutch kit is, you know, maximum like 150 bucks. The diff would be like minimum $900. So go with the clutch. I'll get the flywheel resurfaced, throw the new clutch kit in. Hopefully I can finally solve this nagging issue that's bothered me since 2015. Let's pull it into the garage and we'll get started. I'll see if I can make it vibrate for you when I go in. This thing takes up a little bit more room in the garage than the Saab. And by a little bit more, I mean the Saab is 12.5 feet long and this is 16 feet long. Let that sink in. This is 3.5 feet longer, over 1 meter longer than the Saab. So it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle to get under this thing and work on it just because of how huge it is. First order of business is to get this drive shaft out of here. Should slide right out. I'm gonna put this away, and I'm gonna put the nuts and washers back on the yoke so I don't lose them. Next, I have to unhook the transmission linkages. How would you even describe this? This is a column shift 3-speed transmission, aka 3 on the tree. So if you are pulling the shift lever toward yourself and up and down, the up and down will shift one of these only. And then when you go to shift from, like, say first and then you go out into second, if you shift from in to out, basically it'll shift from like this to this or this to this. So that's kind of how that works. It's not really how you would expect if you're used to working on the standard floor shift transmissions, but that's how it is here. So what we have is two little clips here, one clip here, one clip here, and if we take these clips off, we'll be able to slide that linkage out. There's just a little bushing in there. Alright, those are out of the way now. Now I have to make sure that this transmission can get out even though it has a mount on it right now. Alright, that's only a couple months old. Got all those bolts out, and you can tell that you're supposed to remove it because this one is bolted and all the other parts are riveted. So I'm going to slide that out. Now we have a lot of access here. Next thing I'm seeing is this speedometer cable, so let's take that off. Oh, yeah, there we go. Wow, that's plastic. The clutch lever here is a mechanical thing, so there's no hydraulics, no cable, anything. It's just a lever that pushes on it, so I can just pull that pin right out. Not a big deal. Here's our clutch cover. Over there's some kind of oil drain thing because it's the 1960s and you could just pour oil on the ground. Holy crap, dude. Why do you do this? So this is at the bottom that we're looking at. As we flip it over, we see that there's no reason to RTV this thing on as far as I know. It doesn't hold any fluid, although there is some fluid that dropped into it. It appears that there's a little bit of oil in the bottom, which would probably come from the rear main seal. But why would you RTV this thing? It's ridiculous. So I'll have to clean that off and clean this thing up. Next thing though, I have the flywheel and clutch and everything visible. I just need to pull the transmission back. It's going pretty well so far, and this truck is pretty easy to work on because there's really not any rust on it. It's from Colorado. So what I'm going to do now is I need to pull the transmission off, but I don't have a transmission jack right now, unfortunately. So I'm trying to figure out what to do. And one option is to remove the transmission from the bell housing, leave the bell housing on, and then take that off afterward. That'll give me a little bit better access to the bell housing bolts, but it'll be still kind of sketchy if I don't have a transmission jack. However, I'm considering making a transmission jack. I'll check and see if they have an adapter that will just pop on here real easy like. And if so, I'll buy it. If not, I'll try to make one. Now, my dad offered to go and build a transmission jack since I didn't want to spend $150 just on a Harbor Freight jack I'm going to use like twice. So this is a piece of copper pipe, plumbing pipe, into some wood with some slides on it, and it fits in the hole that my jack has. Let's get going and see how it goes. I'm going to separate the transmission from the bell housing and do each individually, so it hopefully makes it a little less risky for this homemade jack. Figure I better drain this fluid out before I do anything. It's been a while. Oh, man. There we go. And here we are. We're just gonna go in both, I guess. Oh boy, that came out too fast for the funnel. No chunks, just little tiny shavings. And not a whole lot of shavings. That's what the oil looks like coming out. It's kind of dark, kind of cloudy. Good to replace it. Got the transmission jack on, and then we threw this ratchet strap around and hooked it back onto the jack. So hopefully it doesn't fall off and kill me. Okay, that's good. I've got all 4 bolts out, so theoretically I should be able to slide this straight back. Now, I've only done one clutch before on a Chevy truck, and I found that the most important thing is to slide it very straight. Oh, wow, so that was really smooth. Ta-da! Looks like we got a 9-bolt top plate, which will help me identify it later on. HEGT C5TR. Yeah, we'll clean that up. So, what is this, like step 2? Step 2 is done. Let's move on to the bell housing. All right, we got our bell housing here. You can see the release bearing or throwout bearing sitting in there. And we have 6 bolts around the outside. The guy who did my clutch last time was nice enough to weight reduce this one. Okay. Gotta tell you, fellers, this is just silly. Just silly. Ah! I have the sneaking suspicion that the recommended procedure is to remove the engine and transmission as a unit, but I don't want to do that. And I don't have an engine hoist, so that would be many extra tools, wouldn't it? Oh, okay, I see. Starter. There we go. Oh, it's heavy. Now for a brand new clutch job, I feel like that's a little bit excessive amount of wear on the throwout bearing. I can't feel a ridge, but there's definitely a color difference. Let's pull the pressure plate, clutch, and flywheel off tonight. We'll get some parts ordered and circle back. Now this is the pressure plate. The clutch is behind it as we're looking at it, and we have 2, 4, 6 bolts to come out before I can remove that pressure plate, and then the clutch is gonna probably fall out at this point to get out of here. Oh, that was easy. I would expect a lot more torque on those, I guess, but maybe they're not. It's supposed to be torqued very much. That's bolt. Come on, get out of there. Okay. Gotta try not to touch it because I want to know what's going on here. One thing I was guessing might be causing the vibrations in the driveline would be if the flywheel is warped slightly, and then the clutch would have intermittent contact on it as it hits the same high spot. Since this, I can feel a small edge on that, I'm wondering if this might not have gotten resurfaced. Usually you either replace the flywheel or you can resurface it for like 35, 40 bucks. And if that's not done, and if your flywheel has any undulations, you can have issues in your driveline. The long and short of it, if you've never done this, if you don't really know what's going on, is that the pressure plate is a spring that basically your clutch pedal pushes on a spring that pushes the clutch pads here in and off, onto and off of the flywheel. Now we can see that there's some wear on these friction pads. And I'm not an expert here. I don't really know what I'm looking at, so I'm gonna just leave that as it is, and people can comment in the comment section if they want to say. But I'm seeing some uneven wear for sure in these, where it's glazed over here, but it's not here. I'm concerned that the clutch discoloration and the clutch wear anomalies might be partly because of my driving style in trying to overcome the driveline vibrations I've been having. So I'm going to pull the flywheel off, and we'll get that to a machine shop and ask them what they think. One trick you can use to keep this from stopping from spinning is to put one bolt from the bell housing in and one bolt from the pressure plate in. Then you put a wrench over it, and that will not move. This is going to have a lot of torque on these bolts. I'm using a 3/4 inch socket. I'm going to undo them in a star pattern, because you want to usually tighten these in a star pattern. I don't want to warp something more than it is warped if it is. Okay. So we can see here is the end of our crankshaft, and that's where the flywheel bolts on. And here's the pilot bushing where the input shaft of the transmission rests. And then this piece under here goes straight up into that rear main seal that seals against the crankshaft. Just something to keep in mind here, and we'll go check out that flywheel, see how that looks. There's definitely a surface ridge on the edge of that, so that's something that I don't think should be there. I'm going to take this into a machine shop and get them to resurface it. Got some parts in, let's take a look at them and see if they'll fit. Here we have the old clutch, and then there's the flywheel, got resurfaced. We used Proven Force. Here's the new clutch. It's a LUK or Luck brand part number. Same as the inline 6 for the same year. And here we go. So we got the same style diaphragm style pressure plate right here. And then here's the clutch. Don't want to get my greasy gloves on it. But yeah. This is the installation tool, and these are replacement pilot bushings. So I want to check out and make sure that one of these can actually fit my truck, because I forgot to pull the pilot bushing out. And if they don't fit, I'll leave it in. But if they do, it'd be nice to have. And now it's time to clean off the flywheel itself. Got to make sure both the engine side of the flywheel and the clutch side of the flywheel get cleaned off, because there will be oil and grease on these. I'm more concerned about the cleanliness of the clutch side, because that's the side that's going to contaminate the clutch if there's any contamination to do. So we've got a little bit of stuff on here. I'm going to go wipe it off and then spray it again. Okay, well, I'm going to take this over, maybe put a clean glove on, take it over, mount it up, and then we'll get a couple flywheel bolts started, and then we can proceed with that. Unfortunately, the first time I put the flywheel on, I forgot to put this backing plate on, but I'm not going to reshoot everything, so this is just not going to be present in the next few clips. So I've got my new flywheel bolts from LMC Truck, and they have a lot of parts for old trucks. So you want to make sure that you put a little dab of thread locker on there, and then a little dab on the head of the inside of the head of the bolt too, and that will help you bring up a consistent torque value among all your flywheel bolts. Alright, got them all Loctited. They're all marked, and marking them helps you pick up later if you have to step away. You don't forget which ones you've done. Now, these are supposed to be torqued to between 75 and 85 foot-pounds. And generally want to bring those up gradually. So I'm going to do 3 different torque values. I'm going to do 25, probably about 55, and then 85. Guess who got them all in? This guy. So now that I have an asterisk basically on each bolt, I know that I've gone through 3 phases of torquening,
And then I went over with the 85 again to make sure that nothing moved or nothing settled in. So we're all good to go. We're up to 85 and we have the Loctite on the threads and on the heads of the bolts. The next thing to put on is the clutch, and followed by the pressure plate, and there's a little installation tool that's going to make our lives easier. That tool is the clutch alignment tool. Now we have our clutch down here, and it's so beautiful. Let's take it out and we will look. Make sure to wear gloves. You don't want to be touching this clutch material here. And then we're going to look for anything that says flywheel side, or here we go, flywheel side. So I'm going to install this from this side. And then when we install this into the pilot bushing, it'll hold it in place so we can get the pressure plate bolted on correctly and centered on this. The pressure plate, I just sprayed some brake cleaner on, so that'll be nice and clean to go onto here. Let's throw it in. Goes in like that.
Anything else you need from me? Wow.
I think that's gonna stay.
You need this thing?
I need that box scooted right up here. Oh geez, I just can't. There we go. Morning. Last night I threw the pressure plate on over the clutch, flywheel, and flywheel backing plate. And now I'm looking and I think I torqued the pressure plate too low. I'm going to pull these out one by one so the pressure plate doesn't fly off, and I will clean them up, put thread locker on again, and then retorque them to, let's say, 23. Once that's on, I have the what do you call it, bell housing cleaned up with some degreaser. I'm gonna make sure that clutch lever, or the shift, what do you call it, clutch throwout lever, is properly lubricated at its pivot, and then we'll try to wrestle all these big pieces of cast iron in. I got the pressure plate in. Just like the flywheel, you want to torque this in a star pattern, so we have pairs of bolts around 3 parts. So I did like the right bolt on each one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Took it up to 11 pounds first, and then 23 the next. The torque range is 20 to 25. Then I checked it again. So they're all good. Now the pressure plate spring is holding the clutch against the flywheel, so we can take this alignment tool out. One tip if you're concerned about this is you can mark one of the splines on here and put that at the very top when you insert the clutch, and that will allow you to match up the input shaft of the transmission so it slides in easy the first time. I didn't do that because I'm dumb and I don't care. So if it doesn't work, then I will just turn the input shaft a little and try again. This divot in the release lever rides on this pivot point, so I'm just going to throw some grease in there. Well, let's put the throw-up bearing on first. We'll do the same thing with some grease on here. Just let it slide on nice and easy. Yeah, I think that's in. Sweet. Okay, this is so much easier to do this boot when the bell housing's not on the truck. But that's ready to go in. I'm gonna throw a little bit of actual grease in the pivot area for the clutch too, for the clutch lever pin thing, whatever. One thing I should mention is it's fine to take off the bell housing and transmission as one single unit and not separate them, but you can run into issues. When I was doing the clutch on the 350 5-speed Chevy truck, I pulled them both off as one thinking it would save me time, but unfortunately when I put them back on, I pinched a couple wires up here and it was really hard to see everything. So, you know, you can have a risk when you do that. It's huge.
Now that the bell housing is on, it's time to prep the transmission to go in. Before I took the transmission out, I did drain the fluid, drain the oil, but I'm going to drain the oil again, just make sure when I was washing it down that no water got in it. And we still have a little oil in it, so that's good to get the rest out.
That stuff was pretty gross, so I'm glad I'm changing that. Oh.
So we got it set up in here and got the bolts started. You want to remember that you are turning this in 3 axes to try to get it set up. And once you can get it at the right position relative to the engine, you can slide it in and then get 2 diagonal bolts started if you can. And once you get those, you can tighten them down balance them in so it pulls the transmission in straight. And now I'm just torquing them up, not torquing them up, but tighten them down, and then I'll torque them up when they're all flat in there. Oh yeah.
Now I've got my levers here, so I want to verify that those still work. Alright, and now we have the actual linkages here. Going to pull off that pin, clip, put a little grease on that linkage pin. I'm trying to keep this thing in neutral, so I'm going to put that back. It goes back on there. Sweet. Come on. Get on there, you slippery. Sweet. The last thing is there's this spring in here, and this connects up to the release lever. I've been told that when you convert from the 3-finger pressure plate to the modern style diaphragm pressure plate with the many fingers around it, that you don't need one of the springs in here. I'm not sure if it's this spring, but this is a spring that seems to be a return spring for the clutch release lever. So I'm going to get in and see how that feels without the spring, see if I need it. Feels pretty good to me. First, second, reverse, neutral. Last thing up front aside from the starter is this flywheel cover, and I painted on the bottom, which is fine. It was a little rusty. I just rubbed a little oil on the inside, so that's a little protected. And this is the one that the guy put RTV all around, which, since there's a drain right here, the RTV didn't do anything, and it just made it more difficult. So I'm just gonna do Loctite on the bolts and pop it in up here. Boop. Goes along that. So we'll throw that in. Oh. All right, so I think putting the starter back in is probably the most difficult part of this job so far. It's just, it's right down there. I don't know if you can see it. It's right back in here somewhere. Anyway. Oh my God, it's like a finger trap or something. Just, oh, I cannot.
How'd you get it out?
I unscrewed it till it fell out. Here's your trick. Get the exact right length extension because there's a standoff on the engine block that prevents you from putting anything longer in. Are you fucking kidding me?
What?
This jackass who did my clutch reused the oil pan gasket. That's why he RTV'd the whole thing. Oh my God. Can you see this?
Oh, yeah.
Look, we have a crack here, crack here, crack here. This motherfucker fucking RTV'd an old oil pan gasket off on. The reason you don't want RTV in your oil pan gasket is that if a piece of RTV, a little string, gets off and gets clogged in your oil pump, you can starve your engine of oil and then you get to build a new engine. So that's something I'll have to do in the future. I'm not going to do it right now because I need the car to work, but maybe over the winter or something. It's a big job with the twin I-beam. Anyway, well, that was a fun little detour. Let's go and hook the battery cable up to the starter, and we will put the drive shaft in, and I think that is time to see if it'll roll out. I was back here greasing my U-joint with the grease fitting and cleaned it off a little bit to make it look a little better when I put it back in, and that is likely the original U-joint on this truck from 56 years ago. Just goes to show you, if you grease your chassis periodically, you will have U-joints with no play whatsoever in 56 years. Isn't that awesome? I got my drive shaft all bolted up. This is a 28 spline 9-inch rear axle. I'm gonna take this for a test drive, and I'm gonna come back afterward and try to change the oil on this thing, because this also, it's gotten topped off, but it hasn't gotten a full oil change in a long time. Do a 3-point turn, see how this goes. Smooth as a baby's bottom. Now when you're breaking a new clutch, you don't want to beat on it. You just want to give it a nice smooth engagement, and I think 400 or 500 miles is recommended if I remember correctly. This thing drives beautifully. I'm excited to go to the stop sign actually and see how it feels off from the stop. Before I rebuilt the shifter, actually, before the bushings went out, this was a really nice shifter selection, but unfortunately the replacement parts for the shifter, the column shifter, are really poor quality. Hopefully one day we'll get better quality components for these things and be able to make it nice again, but right now it's really sloppy. Alright, we're coming up to the stop. Let's take the scenic way. When I was a kid, everyone waved on that road. You could do a farmer wave to everyone and they would wave back, especially in this truck. Unfortunately, it seems like the wave wave has gone out of style. If you see somebody in an old truck giving you the farmer wave, you give it back, alright? That clutch feels beautiful. It feels like I remember it. It was really tweaky, weird for a while. But this is so nice, very linear engagement. No shudder whatsoever. High five me. I think I got it. Now it's a matter of breaking the clutch in for a while. I gotta make sure it's working well and getting broken in properly so that I don't get any glazing like on the one I pulled out. Is this open? There's one more thing I want to do before I end this episode, and that is change the fluid in the differential, because the differential hasn't had fluid in a long time. That's all the time we have for this video. Be sure to subscribe and watch for part 2. And if you'd like, I have a playlist on each of my project cars. You can check that out on my channel and watch them all if you want.